can I refer members to the draft minutes of proceedings at pages 839 to 847 of your meeting pack. Are members content that the draft minutes of the meeting on the 15th of May are a true reflection of proceedings?
Agreed.
Thank you, members. Item number 6, matters arising. There are no matters arising, so we'll move swiftly on to item number 7. And this is a proposal for a directive on the Union Code relating to medicinal products for human use. And we will now receive departmental oral evidence. And just like to inform members, this item will be recorded by Hansard. Members, agenda items 7 and 8 are oral evidence sessions with departmental officials on the 2 proposed EU acts, which we have just received legal advice on. They make up the package of legislative proposals to reform existing EU pharmaceutical legislation. Item number 7 is on a proposed directive on the Union Code relating to medicinal products for human use. Item number 8 is on a proposed regulation laying down Union procedures for the authorisation and supervision of medicinal products for human use and establishing rules governing the European Medicines Agency. And can I refer members to the relevant papers, which is on page 5 to 575 and pages 576 to 838 of your meeting pack. And just remind members that as part of its consideration of the proposed EU acts, the committee agreed to request initial departmental assessments of impact and invited officials to give oral evidence on the proposals. Can I advise members that the Department of Health's initial assessment of impact on the proposed directive can be found at pages 326 to 571 of your meeting pack. The Department's initial assessment of impact on the proposed regulation can be found at pages 828 to 833 of your meeting pack. Members, the European Parliament agreed its negotiating position on the proposals last year. In the Council, EU member states voted on the proposals yesterday. We don't yet have confirmation of the outcome of this vote and whether trilogues are to commence soon. Can I remind members that in line with agreed processes, departmental officials were provided with questions in advance to be answered as part of the oral evidence session. The questions can be found at page 13 of your meeting pack. And officials were also asked to share their responses in writing before the start of the meeting. We haven't received them yet, but I'm assuming you will go through the questions that were presented. So can I welcome Sean Curley, who's the Principal Pharmaceutical Officer with the Department of Health. You're very welcome, Sean. And Aaron McKendra, who is the Senior Principal Pharmaceutical Officer and Head of Medicine Regulatory Group through the Department of Health. So you're very much welcome, gentlemen, and whenever you're ready, if you would like to present, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, members. Thank you for the opportunity to provide the committee with some background information on both the EU's proposal for a directive on the European Parliament and of the Council of the Union Code relating to medicinal products for human use, known as the directive, and its proposal for a regulation of the European Parliament and the Council laying down Union procedures for the authorisation and supervision of medicinal products for human use and establishing rules governing the European Medicines Agency, EMA, known as the regulation. So my name is Sean Curley. I'm a Principal Pharmaceutical Officer in the Department of Health. My role today is to provide the committee with background information from a health perspective on proposals in terms of medicine supplies coming into Northern Ireland, NI. Along with me, I have Senior Principal Pharmaceutical Officer and Head of Medicines Regulatory Group, Aaron McKendry, who leads on the enforcement of medicines legislation in NI. As members will be aware, the proposed directive relates to medicinal products for human use and will repeal the Directive 2001/83/EC and Directive 2009/35/EC, both of which currently apply in NI via the Windsor Framework, Annex 2, Section 20, medicinal products. The directive lays down the rules for the placing on the market, manufacturing, import, export, supply, distribution, pharmacovigilance, control and use of medicinal products for human use. The proposed regulation will amend Regulation EC number 1397/2007 and Regulation EC EU number 536/2014 and repealing Regulation EC number 726/2004, Regulation EC number 141/2000 and Regulation EC number 1901/2006 for all relevant provisions that apply under the Windsor Framework, Annex 2, Section 20, medicinal products. The regulation lays down the proposed procedures for the authorisation, supervision and pharmacovigilance of medicinal products for human use at EU level, establishes rules and procedures relating to security of supply of medicinal products, and lays down the governance provisions of the EMA. Both these legislative proposals are part of the EU reform package, as you stated, Chair, which together revise and replace existing general pharmaceutical legislation. It is important to consider these reforms together as they form a joint package and apply to medicinal products for human use, including those for the treatment of rare diseases and children. So members have provided questions for the Department to address, and I will provide answers based on the Department's current understanding. Firstly, I will discuss the work the Department has undertaken to understand the interactions between these proposals and the recent EU legislative amendments to ensure the supply of medicines into NI, our engagement with stakeholders, areas of concern or uncertainty, and when an assessment of the proposals will be complete. So there is positive and successful collaborative working relationships that exist between the Department and the Department of Health in England, DHSC, and the UK regulator, the MHRA. This was demonstrated recently in the successful implementation of Windsor framework arrangements for medicines. The MHRA also hosts dedicated partnership support meetings with stakeholders from industry, which provides stakeholders with an opportunity to discuss upcoming guidance and legislation. These channels were used to help implement the Windsor framework arrangements for medicines, and although the Windsor framework dedicated partnership meetings have been stepped down, engagement with stakeholders has continued to support analysis of the impact of EU proposals on the whole of the UK, including Northern Ireland. Regulation 2023-1182, which is the Windsor Framework Arrangements, is a standalone regulation and will continue to apply with the EU farm reforms when the EU farm reforms are introduced. From the 1st of January 2025, the arrangements for medicinal products under this regulation removed NI from the EU centralised authorisation procedure for novel and innovative medicines and disapplied EU falsified medicines directive safety features on medicines packaging placed on the NI market. This means novel and innovative medicinal products are now authorised on a UK-wide basis by the UK regulator, the MHRA, in line with UK legislation. The aspect of FMD safety features also means that medicine packaging can be done UK-wide as well, so there's nothing unique to NI. In terms of Directive 2022-642, it was published in April 2022 and it's a significant piece of legislation for supplying medicines from Great Britain, GB, to NI. The directive permits regulatory requirements such as the location of a qualified person and batch testing to permit these functions to be recognised in GB when supplying the NI market, therefore removing additional regulatory importation controls. It also permits the MHRA to issue a national licence in NI for a medicinal product even where there is a corresponding mutual recognition or decentralised product available in the EU, and that's known as the MRDC procedure. These amendments have been included in the proposed directive under Chapter 17. The reassurance that these two significant amendments will continue to apply in NI under the proposed EU farm reform should provide some assurances to the Committee on the long-term supply of medicines into NI. This means the MHRA will continue to authorise medicines in NI and supplies can continue to be supplied from GB without additional regulatory importation controls. Additionally, aspects of the interaction between the two pieces of legislation and EU proposals are unchanged or will have no impact on NI. For example, any changes to the access of novel and innovative authorised products within the EU or changes to EU authorisation times for those products will not apply in NI because of the amendments under Regulation 2023-1182. And this relates to the proposals of the EU about getting quicker access to these types of medicines, so they don't apply to Northern Ireland. However, it is important to understand how these amendments will interact with other aspects of the new proposals, including the reclassification of antimicrobials as prescription-only medicines. It is equally important to note that Member States are still discussing the proposed EU pharma reforms, and the final proposals may differ from the current drafts that have been published. For For example, there are ongoing discussions within the EU on the period of data exclusivity for novel and innovative medicines. Although any outcomes of these negotiations won't apply in NI due to the arrangements under Windsor Framework, it is an example that proposals are not finalised. Therefore, the Department cannot provide an assessment date at this stage, but the Department will continue to support the MHRA, who is the competent authority for the whole of the UK, as the MHRA continues its ongoing work on the technical details on the reforms. The Department will also continue to work closely with DHSC and all partners as further details of the proposals emerge, including with colleagues from the office in the NI Executive in Brussels. And I'm sure if any members have been out to that office, they will recognise the excellent job that they do, and they do keep us updated on a regular basis on any updates. In terms of members' queries relating to potential actions and negative impacts identified at this stage, as stated, there is some uncertainty concerning the reclassification of antimicrobials as prescription-only medicines. The reclassification of these medicines would mean antimicrobial medicines could no longer be sold or supplied under current provisions as general sales list or pharmacy-only medicines. Therefore, they would need to be supplied or sold under the provisions permitted for prescription-only medicines. Failure to apply the proposals in NI would remove the dual market access that manufacturers in NI currently have when supplying both the EU and UK markets. In regard to paediatric medicines, which members would like some information on, as provided to the committee, most regulatory submissions that trigger paediatric requirements will be products that are within the scope of the EU's centralised authorisation procedure, and therefore these medicines can be regulated under UK legislation. I am unable to confirm how many submissions would meet these requirements. However, marketing authorisation holders would only be able to apply to the MHRA for a UK-wide or NI authorisation. Therefore, the Department does not have any concerns regarding the authorisation or supply of paediatric medicines. And should also state that although we can't give a definitive answer on that, it is exceptionally rare circumstances where this may come up, where they won't be under the EU's centralised procedure. In relation to the financial implications for the pharmaceutical industry, the Department has not engaged with stakeholders on the potential impact at this stage. Finally, members will be aware that any concerns or questions regarding goods of relevance to the operation of the Windsor Framework can be raised by the EU or UK Government through joint bodies. Whilst the Department has a positive working relationship with DHSC and the MHRA, any queries concerning potential discussions at these joint bodies regarding the EU Pharma legislative package should be directed to the UK Government. I hope the members are content with the detailed information provided, and we are now happy to take any further questions members have at this stage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sean. I have Steve Aiken, who would like to ask a few questions.
Yep, thanks very much, Dean. Thanks very much, Dean, for the briefing team. Just a couple of ones. I think I was reading through some of the EMs and some of the explanatory notes, and it said something about new and innovative medicines for Northern Ireland must be authorised by the European Commission on the recommendation of the European Medicines Agency, EMA. Is it your understanding that new and innovative medicines are not covered by the European Medicines Agency and are just by the UK MHRA?
Yes, that would be the case now. So under Windsor Framework arrangements from the 1st of January 2025, all innovative and novel medicines that fall under the scope of the EU centralised authorisation procedure, which are authorised by the European Commission, are now authorised by MHRA for Northern Ireland and the whole of the UK, under UK legislation.
And there's no issue with generics?
In terms of generics would be they would still be licensed by the MHRA, so the EU don't have any say in the authorisation as such. They would be national licences that are authorised by the MHRA. In terms of the supply of them and the authorisation of them, no concerns with that at the moment, no. And like as you say, we are letting MHRA continue with their looking at the technical details of the proposals, but in terms of authorisations, no concerns at this moment in time.
Okay. One of the ones, I think one of the previous pieces of legislation that they're looking to repeal, I think, was 762/2004. And I don't bother that. It actually said in the piece of legislation, it said human and veterinary medicine, and the changes just goes to human medicine. Does that mean that there's some of the things that we're already looking at are covered in the sort of, because one of our big concerns is on veterinary medicine and authorization of veterinary medicine. So that takes the veterinary medicine completely out of the whole human medicine chain, does it?
Maybe need to take that away and look at it. Not.
Yeah, it just stuck out there because when I was reading it, because it said very clearly human and veterinary medicine, and then when they were doing the amendment, it just said human medicine. So I wonder if there's any other implications from that, but it's just one of those particular questions. And I quite like your term of phrase, and I'll take it up with the minister when I see him separately on Tuesday. But when you say scale and depth of products that fall under scope of new arrangements were unknown at this time of publication, is that a bit of a civil service catch-all for you don't know what's quite going on?
No, so that's, I suppose, when the Windsor framework, this obviously relates to the UK EM. So when the UK EM first was published, it was shortly after the Windsor framework had been announced. The actual details of the Windsor framework and how that would work and interact with medicines, it wasn't known at that point. It wasn't until they actually looked at the technical details of the legislation and how it interacts with other parts of legislation, that's when they understood the scale and scope. So it really isn't anything untowards. It simply was, when it was first announced, the details and technical details weren't really known. Okay.
And issues to do with medical trials and issues to do with trial medicines and that sort of area. And also there's something in it about sort of testing and qualification of medical testing as well. Have you any concerns about that either?
So in terms of, I think it was the regulation, the EU Amendment Directive 2022-642. So while it did address and change aspects for medicinal products, it also altered for clinical trials, things known as investigative medicinal products, IMPs. So it also allows for them to continue to flow from GB to NI without any additional importation requirements. So
they'd be still licensed under UK MRHA or whatever the sort of the health. Okay. So basically, you're quite content that even though there's significant changes coming through with the legislative process on the European side, we're still covered by the Windsor framework articles. And as far as medicines and medical procedures and the rest of it are covered, we still fall under the UK regulation.
Well, there are some parts of obviously the proposals that will apply in Northern Ireland. In terms of novel and innovative medicines, they'll be under UK legislation, but things that don't fall under the scope of that will fall under the scope of this under these EU proposals. But in terms of how they interact with the two EU amendments, like I say, MHRA are continuing to look at the technical details for that, and there's some aspects that there is some uncertainty, such as that reclassification of antimicrobials as prescription-only medicines.
So is it only antimicrobials you think are going to fall out of the scope, or is there anything else that's likely to fall out of the scope?
So antimicrobials has been added into the proposal. So under the proposals, prescription-only medicines, it mentions parenteral, like medicines that are used for parenterally, i.e. they're injected. They're prescription-only medicines, but they've added antimicrobial in there because they're looking at reducing antimicrobial resistance. So they think by adding that in as a prescription-only medicine and putting on more restrictions into how they're supplied, it would help bring down antimicrobial resistance. So it is something that we're working with the MHRA on to understand how that would work.
Okay, and you could flag up to this committee if you saw an area that was coming out of scope, so that we could be aware of that.
If there's any other uncertainty that does come through, we'd be happy to share with the committee. If there's uncertainty that we're still looking at, I should really state and I know the health committee, when the chief pharmaceutical officer Cathy Harrison during EU exit days and trying to get some of these proposals, she wasn't afraid to voice those concerns because medicine supplies to Northern Ireland are vital. So she was very vocal with that. And we will continue to be vocal if there is uncertainty, which is likely to impact on medicine supply. So I want to reassure committees that we will share uncertainty if that is the case.
Okay. And finally, thank you very much indeed for the quality of your evidence. sometimes we don't quite get the same level of quality presented in front of the committee. And Mayor, thank you for that. And I think thank you for answering the questions as well as you have. That's enough, Chair, for me. Thank you.
Okay, Steve. We now have Peter.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I certainly want to echo Steve's comments. The evidence has been really, really sound. I have a couple of questions. I'm going to start off with antimicrobials, which is more or less where Steve left off, particularly antifungals. And I understand, Sean, the driver behind the EU perhaps moving some of these to prescription only to mitigate perhaps resistance to some of these issues. At the moment, can you buy antifungals without a prescription in Northern Ireland?
So there are three classifications of medicine in Northern Ireland. So with GSL medicines, which are the general sales list, which would be the least tightly controlled.
Yep.
And with pharmacy medicines, which are sold only from a pharmacy, might be considered as over the counter. And then prescription only medicines, which, as you say, need a prescription and are supplied from a pharmacy, barring some exceptions. So I think what you're asking is, are any antifungals falling within that GSL category? And there would be some. And GSL then would be medicines you might buy in a garage or a large supermarket, that sort of a thing. So there would be some medicines that would fall in that category.
Okay. And those would be, in the antifungal category, those could be treatments for athlete's foot or yeast infection, for example. My wife's a pharmacist, so I know a wee bit about this sort of stuff. So let's stay on the sales of pharmaceutical sales. So things, again, that sort of step up from GSL. So things you might go to a pharmacy and say, could I have X or Y? Again, that would probably widen the list a little bit in terms of antimicrobials. So there'd be other things that you could perhaps purchase directly from a pharmacist on that list. I'm heading towards a question. So whilst I understand the driver for the possible tightening, let's call it, of sale of antimicrobials, would I be correct in saying that if this went through and a number of either antifungals, antibacterials, whatever, were put onto a prescription-only list, which I think is what they're considering, if I understood your evidence correctly, would that have an impact on cost? Not necessarily for the consumer, because obviously those would then be free, but I'm thinking of the cost of the health service, because my understanding would be it's a lot cheaper for the health service to have someone walk in and buy a treatment for athlete's foot off a counter, or go to a pharmacist and say, can I have this? And they will give it to you and they'll charge you. Would I be right in saying it could have, well, let's call it significant cost implications, both from getting the scripts, bringing the script down, the process involved in processing that script, and then the issuing of the actual medicines itself?
I'll take
Sean?
that one. Yeah. In terms of the costing, I can't give you an estimate at this stage of how much
I'm not
it would cost.
asking you to.
Yeah. But what I would say is it would be counterproductive to what the Department of Health's policy would be, which is for self-care medicines. If a patient can go and purchase a medicine, we would be encouraging patients to go and self-care. So it would be counterproductive to the Department of Health's policy in that regard. In terms of the costing, I wouldn't be able to give.
I wouldn't. Look, I'm not going to ask you to. That's a very honest answer. I suppose I would have two concerns around the possible move, whilst understanding the underlying rationale for the EU moving in this direction. And my two concerns would be, firstly, as I expected you would say, Sean, it's counterproductive to where DOH are trying to move, which is in around self-care and access to these things so that people can treat, and that's obviously cost effective within the wider health service. The second one would be then just the cost to the health service. So it is, my understanding is it is significantly cheaper as it stands for someone to go in and pick up say something for athlete's foot off a shelf in a pharmacy, or to go to a pharmacist and say, could I have this medicine? And they will get it off the shelf behind them and they will dispense it to you. Again, that's stuff that we're buying ourselves, and those tend to be quite cheap. If we move in this direction and the EU does place antimicrobials on a prescription-only list, the cost for those drugs will significantly increase. Not necessarily just for the consumer because of the sort of the supply chain, but for the health service. I would imagine in terms of that move, what you're doing is you're shifting everything way back to the GP, and then there's an entire chain of events all the way to a pharmacist giving you that medicine. Would I be right in saying that?
There are, I need to be careful because obviously you'd be the expert when it comes to this, but there are other ways of obtaining prescription-only medicines other than via prescription. Right. So there are provisions that could be explored, but I'll just go back to it would be counterproductive to exactly what we're trying to do in terms of self-care. So in that regard, there obviously will be additional costs to the health service, whatever provisions probably are there, but there may be private provisions that could still be offered.
You're talking about private scripts, or?
Not necessarily. It's some of the exemptions that would exist that maybe allow supply of prescription-only medicines without a prescription, so patient group direction, for example. Yep. So members might be familiar with, for example, a private flu vaccine might be an example of that, where you could attend the pharmacy and obtain a prescription-only medicine without a prescription. So there may be scope to explore some of those things.
You might pay £100 for it, though. You don't have to answer that, Aaron. I think probably I'll finish on this one, just saying, would you accept that that in terms of cost to the Department of Health, that a move from over-the-counter or off-the-shelf medicines to prescription-only medicines for antimicrobials would cost the health service more, given what I've outlined in terms of general process, if that was applied in Northern Ireland?
I think what we can just say, obviously, because obviously we can't go into financial, and we wouldn't have the details of that. All we would say is it changes the way in which those products are supplied and sold. And I'm not trying to.
No. I get
yeah.
that.
So how a patient accesses them, if they go to the GP, or if there's alternative provisions that they may use, which may be private provisions within a pharmacy, or alternative provisions that permit the sale or supply of such products. So we can't really give a definition of or a clarification of what a patient will do.
No, I accept that. My second question was around the 193, and it's regarding it's the EM from DHSC, and it is the paragraph on UK supply resilience. So I want to just quote a couple of lines from that. It says, or have been the EU touchpoint in their supply chain changes that strengthen security of supply for EU member states may have indirect impacts on UK supply resilience. I assume you've read the EM from the department. Could you comment on that, especially that last line there? Strengthening security of supply for EU member states may have indirect impacts on UK supply resilience. I assume they're talking about medicines there.
So I work with the DHSC lead on the maintenance of medicine supply chains to the whole of the UK. Yep. I work very closely with DHSC on medicine shortages. So beyond just this work, I work on medicine shortages and also improving supply chain resilience. So I understand the work that they are doing on this. So they are looking at the farmer proposals, but I don't think there's anything at the minute which is of too much concern. I understand the EU are also bringing forward the Critical Medicines Act, which DHSC are also monitoring on a UK-wide, the impact on UK-wide. But again, I don't believe there's too much in there which is causing too much concern at this moment in time.
Okay. I'll just want to read out paragraph 25 too, the same area. However, there may be negative impacts on UK supply resilience if these measures lead suppliers to prioritise the EU market over the UK. Would you want to comment on that? So it's slightly different from what the first one I just read. So obviously I'll let you summarise what you think they're saying, but there could be negative impacts on UK supply resilience if measures lead suppliers to prioritise EU over the UK?
Again, just from the work that I've done, the UK market is still a very, very attractive market. So in terms of that, I don't know the information that they've got and the information in which they are basing that on, but I just know that the UK market is still a very attractive market, particularly for innovative and novel medicines, and authorisations for the UK market is still quite high. So yeah, I don't have any evidence or anything to base that on.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much, Sean and Aaron. Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Declan?
Thanks, Ciara. You may already have dealt with this in your last intervention, Sean, but to go back to an earlier comment that you made in your evidence, can you confirm that the committee should be assured that medicine supplies will continue uninterrupted, and that should not be a point of concern for us at this particular juncture in light of what is being proposed?
Yeah, so based on the proposals we've seen so far and the interaction with the two, like I said, they are two significant pieces of EU amendments. The interaction, the vast majority of it, from what we can see, is it doesn't change it or it has no impact. In terms of uncertainty, there are, such as the reclassification of antimicrobials. In terms of will that impact on supply, I genuinely don't know what manufacturers would do or what steps will be taken. Obviously, if these proposals come in, MHRA and the UK government will have to look at them and decide what to do, because all medicines are authorised on a UK-wide basis, so they'll have to make a decision on how that will interact with the whole of the UK. So in terms of that, I can't give it a definitive, but I want to reassure that I can't see anything in the proposals at the minute which would disrupt supplies. Yeah,
I think that's important
Yeah.
to place on the record. We can only go on what we know at this particular point in time, and as you and Aaron assess the situation, there is no concern about disruption to supplies. That's very helpful. Thank you.
No other member has any questions. So on behalf of the committee, can I thank both Sean and Aaron for your presentation today. Really, really appreciate it. So thank you.
Well, and can I just put on record, obviously you said about the evidence, it's due to that. I know it's due to our collaborative work that we have with our UK counterparts in DHSC and the MHRA. They really do help us out on that. So I just want to put on the record my appreciation to them in this committee. And if committee members would like a written update to the questions that they did ask, we can provide that after this session also.
Much appreciated. Thank
You
you.
guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just to advise members, obviously, that once adopted and published in the official journal of the EU and if notified to the committee would have to make a decision on whether to hold an inquiry on each individual act. Therefore, it is proposed that the committee continues to gather evidence on each proposal individually. And I advise members that the key stakeholders identified by RAISE are at pages 572 to 575 of the meeting pack for the proposed directive, and 834 to 837 for the proposed regulation. So regarding agenda item number 7 and the proposed directive, can I ask members, are they content that the views of stakeholders identified by RAISE are sought via Citizen Space with a 4-week deadline for a response? And obviously the Citizen Space survey will be promoted on social media and anyone will be willing to respond. Can I also ask members of the content that the Department of Health is asked to submit a revised assessment of impact when it has more information on the proposal? And then likewise, can I ask members, are they content that RAISE is asked to monitor the progress of the proposal as it progresses through the EU legislative system? So members content? Yeah. Thank you, members. And just regarding item number 8, the proposed regulation, can I ask members, are they content with the similar actions that with the stakeholder consultation, writing to the department and asking RAISE to monitor? And these were also carried out for the proposed for the regulation. So you're content, yes, with the same actions? Yeah, thank you, members. Members, I just have to pop out for 10 minutes because I have a delegation of 60 people. They've just arrived, so I'm going to pop out, and if you don't mind, David is going to just stand in to cover correspondence, and I hopefully will be back. Okay, Thank you, David.
Actually, I didn't realise we were putting it right here. Okay, members, been left with the heavy duty stuff. Correspondence. It's item 9.1 at pages 853 to 856 of the meeting pack. It's an update from the Executive Office on proposed new and replacement EU acts, which started their legislative passage before the DSE was established. Can I remind members that the committee is currently carrying out scrutiny on some of these proposals, and an update will be provided at a future meeting once stakeholder consultations have closed. Are members happy to note?
Yes.
Okay. Item 9.2 at pages 857 to 858 of the meeting pack is a copy of correspondence from the House of Lords Northern Ireland Scrutiny Committee to the British Government regarding proposed EU regulation on the welfare of dogs and cats and their traceability. Committee is monitoring this proposal and heard departmental evidence and consulted stakeholders in October last year. We received quarterly status updates from RAISE on the proposal. Are members content to note?
Yep.
Item 9.3 at pages 859 to 860 of the meeting pack is a copy of correspondence from the Northern Ireland Scrutiny Committee to the British Government regarding Regulation EU 2024-1143 on geographical indications for wine, spirit drinks and agricultural products. The DSC previously conducted an inquiry into the EU Act and published its report on May 2024. Are members content to note?
Yep.
Thank you. Item 9.4, pages 861 to 862 of the meeting pack, is a copy of correspondence from the Northern Ireland Scrutiny Committee to the British Government regarding Commission delegated relegation on appropriate measures to ensure the effective and safe use of veterinary medicinal products. Are members content to note?
Good.
Yeah. 9.5, pages 863 to 864, is a copy of correspondence from the Northern Ireland Scrutiny Committee to the British Government regarding its EM on a proposed regulation on a gradual rollout of Euromed. The regulation was published in July 2024 and the committee decided not to conduct an inquiry. Are members content to note? Item 9.6, pages 865 to 866 of the meeting pack, is a copy of correspondence from the Northern Ireland Scrutiny Committee to the British Government regarding its EM on European Commission the European Commission Work Programme 2025. The letter refers to the paper prepared by RAISE for this committee on initiatives in the work programme which could potentially result in a new or replacement EU acts. Are members content to note? Item 9.7, pages 867 to 868 of the meeting pack, is a copy of correspondence from the Northern Ireland Scrutiny Committee to the British Government regarding Regulation 2024-1252, establishing a framework for ensuring a secure and sustainable supply of critical raw materials. The committee carried out an inquiry on Articles 40, 41 and 43 of the regulation in June 2024. The EU-UK Joint Committee adopted a decision to add the regulation to the Windsor framework in April. Are members content to note? And finally, for correspondence, item 9.8, pages 869 to 870, is a copy of correspondence from the Northern Ireland Scrutiny Committee to the British Government regarding Regulation 2023-2411 on the protection of geographical indications for craft and industrial products. The EU-UK Joint Committee adopted a decision to add the regulation to the Windsor framework in April. Are members content to note? Thank you. Moving on to the next items business, chairperson's business. Just like to remind members that the committee only meets when it needs to during recess periods, and it's possible that the committee may need to meet during the summer recess, and so it would be helpful if members inform the Secretariat of the dates when they are unable to attend a meeting during the July and August period. Can I advise members that, unlike last summer, arrangements are now in place for substitute members to be nominated, and could I encourage members to inform the Secretariat of their availability and to make arrangement for a substitute member where appropriate. so that any potential quorum difficulties can be addressed at an early stage. And what is the timeline you have to notify your substitute by?
It's more or less a week before, 4 days before. I'll check it and we'll send
No problem, just for members to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Can I, oh, well, there we go, I should have preempted the next page. Ask the Secretariat team to email members to remind them of the agreed process for nominating a substitute member. So members, you'll all be informed of that, to ask for the dates that members are unavailable during the summer recess. So moving then to the next item of business. Any other business? Do members have any other business? No, and then move to the next slide, the date, time, place of the next meeting. Just to inform members, the next meeting of committee has been scheduled for Thursday the 29th of May 2025 at room 30 at 10 a.m. Are members content that given the public holiday on Monday, the meeting pack is issued on Tuesday of next week? Thank you, members. And just remains then to adjourn the meeting and ask the Secretariat to close the meeting. Thank you. Thank you, members.
Committee Room 30. Sound.